Hey there, Ryan Kingsline here of ZBrush Workshops with another tip on rendering inside of ZBrush. In this tip, I want to take a look at materials, shader 1, shader 2, shader 3, and try to give a sense of how this whole system was meant to work. So let's grab a material. Let's start breaking this down. So right now I've got Skin Shade 4, and this is pretty much a basic material. Now there's a lecture I used to give when I taught at different colleges and when I would go around to the different companies. I always had a material section. So when I went to EA and Sony and ILM and all these places, I always had this one section way back when we were talking ZBrush 2 days about materials. And people weren't that interested back then because everybody wanted to render in Maya and all that stuff. That's changing because there is so much power in ZBrush. And if you're a concept artist, or if you are somebody who makes their money off of designs, you don't have time for Maya, Max, XSI. So you want to have a grasp of this. And so what I'm going to do is just open this material palette, and I want to just talk about what is in here, because there is a lot of information in this palette. The first thing you need to know is that there are two main types of materials. There are matte cap, and then there are standard materials. Those are two distinct types. They have an entirely different system to them. Matte caps we looked at in my last video. They derive the color as well as the value information from this little shader ball right there. And this will tell ZBrush what to color every point on the surface of your model based on the direction that that point faces in space. That's pretty cool. It's a hugely optimized system for rendering. It also allows you to be an artist, go in there and start to create your own, like some of the stuff Ralph Stump did. Amazing matte caps that guy put together. So you want to make sure you find them, get them, and use those matte caps, and thank Ralph because he did all our community a huge service. The other thing that you want to be looking at is standard materials. Now standard materials, that's back in the ZBrush 2 days, that's all we had, and they're really incredibly powerful. But the problem with standard materials, it's more of a PR problem. They're very powerful. They're intensely functional. There's a lot of different things you can do. But when you open up this palette, you see things like gradient map, you see things like reflected plastic, reflected map. These are actually newer. Colorized glow, and jelly bean. Jelly bean was my favorite because it's kind of like that dog doo-doo paint effect inside Maya. It's just that effect that had to be there for I don't know what reason. It can lead you to think that these are just kind of silly and they're kind of toys, mostly because you're not immediately connecting with them. In matte cap, you immediately connect. You say, okay, green clay. I know what that looks like. I wanted green clay. I wanted red wax. I wanted chrome. So it's a little bit more directed. But all of that said, what you need to know about standard materials is that there's a couple of different elements to them. So if we were to say, take a look at the elements, the first thing you need to know is that there are shader channels and that there are utilities. Those two elements are really important. Utilities eventually became matte caps, like they eventually grew to that. But I want you to think about these two things, shader channels and utilities. And then let's get in and take a look at what one of these guys looks like. This in the material palette, right here, you see where it says S1, and then 2, 3, and 4. S1, that is a shader channel. And this is a very basic shader channel. This is the backbone of the material system. All of this stuff. So shader channels basically means that you can have 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these different materials layered right on top of each other. Think of them as a layered material in Maya, if you know Maya. And they compound one upon the other. So as you add them, it becomes brighter and brighter and brighter. But what they allow you to do is they allow you to say, start to separate out the lighting, so to speak. Shader channel 1 might be, say, the main diffuse quality. So main diffuse and spec quality. And then whatever you're not able to get in your specular with number 1, you might come in, you might add a channel, and this one you only want to augment the specularity. So you might go for some anisotropic specularity, you might kind of spread that specularity out, you know, whatever. Shader channel 3, you could use this for a rim light. Now, that's the way I would always talk about it. Nowadays, you know, you just kind of light the back, that's fine, or you have a matte cap that lights the back. But shader channel 3 can completely reverse the lighting. Any of them can. And then 4, if you want it, for other things. Anyways, the idea is that you're layering effect upon effect upon effect. And that is the primary function of them. So that's shader channels. What about utilities? Let's go in and let's select gradient map. Notice that there are 2 channels, 1 and 2. 2 is highlighted, so this is what we would call just a basic material channel. It's the backbone. Remember, all the core features are in there. So what's in shader channel 1? A utility. Something that will modify that map. So that's a texture map, or some color, or something is in there. And then all of this, these are settings that are used to modify that. So now if you go back and you think about, say, a developer developing software, one of the geniuses of Pixologic is that they have been able to grow this application consistently in an organic and natural way. You're looking at the very beginnings of matte caps right here. Matte caps eventually just took a texture and then added some settings to it, and before you know it, you have an incredibly powerful system inside of ZBrush that can do a ton of different things. So here is essentially a utility with a texture map and a whole bunch of settings that you can do stuff with. You can also add a shader channel. And that's something that some of these other materials have. So let's take a look at, let's say, some of the sketch ones. Basic material channel. So we have a basic channel here. And then looks like we've got some kind of matte cap material here. We have cavity detection, cavity transition, intensities, monochromatic, depth, but we have a different texture here. We don't have the traditional matte cap texture. And that's fine, because you know what this is saying is that everything is going to be white when you use this. Everything is considered to be white. Because remember, matte caps, you have a sphere. They assume that you've got this perfect circle in the center, and then they just sample what the color is at different junctures and basically convert that into information that says, well, this is going to be one color, that's going to be another color, that's another color. You know, that's compounded with the color you already have on the model, of course, and so that complicates your life because this also has color information. So you have to keep in mind, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, but I always find it easier to understand things when I break it down into the simple elements. So let me just continue, or let me just end with breaking that up one more time. Remember that you have types of materials. So you have matte caps and you have standards. And then in terms of the standards, you then have elements. So the elements that you need to be aware of are your shader channels. And don't forget, although you won't use them that often, your utilities. You're not going to use them too often, but it's important to know that they're there, in my opinion, because then you're more in depth with the application and your mastery of it is more complete. And that's our goal. Now, we can talk a little bit about shader channels in the next tips and tricks section, and I can give you some sense of how all of these elements work. But I hope you enjoyed, and good luck with your sculpting.